Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to take a look back at all of the TBRs I've made and see if I'm actually reading the books that I put on them. I started making TBRs last May, so this month it had been 1 year of making TBRs, of making lists of the books that I claimed I was going to read that month or that season in some cases, and I was curious if making these is actually affecting my reading and what I'm prioritizing, or if I'm just making them and then reading whatever and ignoring my TBRs entirely. I have in front of me all of my TBRs that I've made in the last 12 months, and I'm going to go through them and see how many of the books I'm actually reading and how many of them are just sitting there on my backlist waiting for me to remember them. So I have quite a few books to get through, so I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's just get right into it. Starting with May of last year, first book is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. I did read this. I did love it. Also finished that whole series. Next up is Master Assassins by Robert V.S. Reddick. I really liked this story, and I think the narration was interesting, but I ended up DNFing it. I wasn't comfortable with some of the content in it, so I might read something else from him in the future, but that one counts. DNFs are going to count. If I read them and decided I didn't like them, I'm going to count that as a win. The Vagrant by Peter Newman. I haven't read this. This has been on my shelves for so long. I need to read that. A Crown of Swords, The Path of Daggers, Winter's Heart, and Crossroads of Twilight by Robert Jordan. I did read all of these. This is a very big TBR. I started off with a big one. I also, on May, have In the Labyrinth of Drakes, In the Sanctuary of Wings, and Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan. I read all three of these. These are the last two books in Memoirs of Lady Trent series and then the companion novel. So I only have one book from May that I didn't read. That's pretty good. From June of 2022, Green Mansions by W.H. Hudson. This is a book I own. I have no idea what it's about. I still haven't read it. Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard. I have not read this. I keep thinking I don't want to read it because YA hasn't been very appealing to me lately, but I still think it sounds like an interesting story, and I've liked her writing previously. I'll read that someday. The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I did read this. It was just okay. Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Dewar. I DNF'd this because I didn't realize that it's like 3 timelines that are all connected by an object, I think a book, and I just wasn't very interested when I started it. So I'm going to count that. I might give it a second chance in the future. Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. I have not finished this. I started it. I still haven't read it. Knife of Dreams, The Gathering Storm, Towers of Midnight, and A Memory of Light by Robert Jordan. I have read all of these. So 3 books from June left. Not too bad. July of 2022, King of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. I did read this. I don't think I read this in July, but I have read it. The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. I DNF'd this. This is another one I might give a second chance. It was just too much information up front, and I was not in the mood for that when I picked it up. Might give that a second chance. Might not. The Bone Orchard by Sarah A. Mueller. I read this. I really liked this. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I also read and liked this. Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. The rest of this is T. Kingfisher. Sword Heart, Clockwork Boys, Minor Mage, and A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. I have read all of these. I read everything from that TBR. That's exciting. Okay, August of 2022, The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I have read Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Moore. I DNF'd this. Again, I might give this another chance in the future. I just wasn't in the mood for it when I picked it up. Malice by John Gwynne, I still haven't read. I still want to read this. Gilded by Marissa Meyer. This was another YA that I've liked Marissa Meyer previously, so I wanted to try her new series, and then I wasn't sure I wanted to try it because it's YA. I haven't read it. For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten. I did read this. It was fine. I really don't remember it that much, honestly. It did not stick with me. Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. I didn't read this. I didn't even try. So after 4 months of making monthly TBRs, I made a seasonal TBR to try that instead because I was still trying out making TBRs for fall, September to November of 2022. I had Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I read this. I loved it. My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I DNF'd this. I might give it another try in the future. I was trying to read more seasonal reads, and I'm just not really a seasonal reader. Nevermore by Jessica Townsend, I read and loved. Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, I read and loved. Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames, I read and loved. The Black Company by Glenn Cook, I have not read yet. Odd Apocalypse by Dean Koontz, I have not read yet. So only 2 for a whole season. That wasn't a very big TBR for 3 months, though, to be honest. October of 2022, this was specifically for a 24-hour horror readathon. I think it was called the 24-hour horror-a-thon. Again, I was trying to read seasonally, and I thought that was a good time to try horror because I don't read a lot of that anymore. And looking at this, I did not read much of it. And in the Apocalypse by Catherine Turner, I DNF'd. Later by Stephen King, I didn't read. The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, I didn't read. The House by Raylan Drake, I didn't read. Holic by Clamp, I did read. And Hack Slash by Tim Seeley. I don't know which Hack Slash I read. And within my library, it said that it was the first, but it definitely wasn't. But I read it. I read one of them. Oh, this is a big one. December of 2022, the month where I read far too many Christmas books. This is a lot of books. The Christmas Mystery by James Patterson, I read. The Christmas Escape by Anne Perry, I read. Christmas Carol Murder by Leslie Meyer. I'm trying to remember. Some of these books from Christmas blend together. I can't remember one from the other. Christmas Carol Murder. Oh, I did read this. That one was okay. I'll Be Home for Christmas by Donna Andrews. I read. That one was pretty good. The Christmas Wedding Guest by Susan Mallory. I read. 12 Days of Christmas by Debbie Maycomber. I read. She writes such like silly romance, heartwarming stories that I don't normally love, but they're very enjoyable for some reason. Starry Night by Debbie Maycomber. I also read this. It's an absolutely ridiculous romance story, but I had fun with it. The Christmas Train by David Balducci. I read this. I didn't really like it. Always in December by Emily Stone. I really liked this. It's the most tragic romance. I don't even know if you should call it a romance, but I really enjoyed it. One Snowy Night by Jill Shelvis. I read. It was fine. The Christmas Wedding by James Patterson. I read this. I liked half of the story and the other half was just ridiculous. I'll Be Home for Hanukkah by K.K. Hendon. I did not read. The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. I DNF'd that. Had some weird content and descriptions that made me uncomfortable, so I stopped reading it because I heard it doesn't get better, at least in that regard. The Ninth Hour by Alice McDermott, I did not read. Last One Home by Debbie May Comber, I did not read. The Lost World by Michael Crichton, I did read. I really liked it. Drowned Woods by Emily Lloyd-Jones, I have not read this. January 2023. Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. I have not read this. I keep going back and forth on this one. I was really excited about King of Scars, and it did not give me what I wanted it to give me. So I decided I wasn't going to read Rule of Wolves because I was so disappointed. But I think I still want to read it. King of Scars wasn't bad. It just wasn't what I thought this duology was going to be. I'll probably read it. Whatever. I'll read it one day. The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. I read this. I loved it. I also have read that whole series already. Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. I read this. I have one book left in that series. Well, of the ones that are out. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I read this. I didn't like it, but I read it. The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. I have not read this. Did I read this? I did read this. I DNF'd this. I DNF'd that one. February 2023. Holy Sister by Mark Lawrence. That's weird that I never put Grey Sister on a TBR. I read that. I finished that series. Before Your Memory Fades by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I have read. Wild Massive by Scott O'More. I DNF'd. Too much information up front for me. It's not something I like in a book, and that's what happened in that book. Cool story, but just didn't work for me. Emperor of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. I read this. I liked that series. That was the last book in that series. Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames. I read this. I liked it. I didn't like it nearly as much as the first book, Kings of the Wild, but I enjoyed it. A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. I read that. I really liked it. That's everything for February. Yay! March 2023. The Girl in the Tower and The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. That's the rest of the Winter Night trilogy, The Bear and the Nightingale. Read both of those. A Feast for Crows by George R.R. Martin. I read that. Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. I read that. The Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. I have not read yet. I'm hopefully going to get it this month. But it depends if my library copy comes in before the end of the month. Among Thieves by M.J. Kuhn. I have not read. The Lives of the Ajungo by Moses Osuotomi. I have read. That was really good. The Sword Defiant by Gareth Hanrahan. I have not read. Song of Blood and Stone by El Penelope. I started this. I'm almost halfway through it, but I haven't finished it. And then this month, April 2023, I have A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. I just got that from the library, so should be able to get through that this month. The Wise Man's Spear by Patrick Rothfuss. I think I already said this one. I did. That's from June. I've been saying I'm going to finish reading this book for so long. Maybe this will be the month. Maybe not. Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. I haven't read any of these at this moment, I can say. Bad Cree by Jessica Johns, Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott, and The Book of Gothel by Mary McMine. These I all I have all of these from the library currently, so I'm hoping in the next week I'll get through all three of them. Looking at what I've read versus what I haven't. I read a lot more from my TBRs than I expected. I thought this was going to be a lot worse. 25 left. So I've read 62 of the books that were on my TBRs. That's way more than I thought. So I still have to read The Vagrant Green Mansions, Realmbreaker, The Wise Man's Fear, Malice, Gilded, Razorblade Tears, The Black Company, Odd Apocalypse, Later, The Haunting of Hill House, The House, I'll Be Home for Hanukkah, The Ninth Hour, Last One Home, The Drowned Woods, Rule of Wolves, Last Argument of Kings, Among Thieves, The Sword Defiant, Song of Blood and Stone, A Dance with Dragons, Bad Cree, Thistlefoot, and The Book of Gothel. For the most part, I'm still really interested in all of these. The YAs I'm still on the fence about, but I'm at least going to give them a try. Finish up the Grishaverse. There's one book that I haven't read. There are a few seasonal reads, horror, and I think one of them is maybe a thriller. Not genres that I normally go for. So I don't know when I'll get to those. It'll probably remain at the bottom of my TBR, but I do still think I want to read everything on here that's left. And I think maybe in the next few months, I'm going to prioritize this list over adding new things, with the exception of like new releases. I might start pulling from this list in the next couple of months. 25 books, maybe the next 2 or 3 months. Prioritize these things. Hopefully get rid of everything that's looming over me from TBR's past. All right, that's all for me today. Well, let me know if you read the books on your TBRs or if they're like mine where you try to read them but often get distracted in favor of other mood reads. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.